Saudi Arabia, Ibrahim Thiaw, Undersecretary General of the United Nations, Executive Secretary, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, UNCCD, and Naoko Ishii, Director of the Center for Global Commons, University of Tokyo in Japan, and Tariq Al-Alemi, co-founder of 3BL Associates in Bahrain. Welcome all. I'm Maya Hajej. I'm with Asharq News with Bloomberg, and I will start with you, Your Excellency, to begin with. Why is the issue of land degradation so important to your country?
في الواقع موضوع يتداول الأراضي هو
In fact, degraded lands is an important topic not only for our country, but for all the countries around the world. Of course, it is a major problem in our desert. You spoke about 20% by 2060, yet we heard since this morning different figures reaching 40%. I think that lands are a main resource for human beings and animals, and we cannot ensure biodiversity, we cannot implement the sustainable development goals without protecting our lands to ensure sustainable life.
Share, if you can, some successful examples of land restoration projects or initiatives that have yielded positive outcomes when we talk in that direction.
There are multiple in the world. I'll just pick up a few that I think could be considered as good examples. In China, in Mongolia, a desert, sand dunes were moving 30 years ago. And a private company came to invest in sand dunes and had to negotiate with communities so as to have a long lease, because it takes that long to actually restore the land. 30 years later, of course, they had to pay a fee to the community to own the land. I mean, to use the land, not to own it. And 30 years later, they came to renegotiate with the communities because they wanted to go for another 30-year term. The communities told them that they have to pay at least twice as much as they paid earlier. Why? Because the land had a value. They were able to restore it. They were able to produce food. They were able to have energy. And they were able to actually generate economic income. So the community saw this land as no longer sand dunes, but as a program where they can actually... So the private company agreed to do that, and they paid for another 30 years. So it's a very good example, because it were sand dunes where people were thinking there is no hope. Okay. But it is possible to actually restore the land.
So when we talk about land restoration, I'm going to ask you more. It's not desertification or deforestation. It's about the land itself. So in what sense?
It's about, okay, we are 8 billion people in the world today. And we eat, we drink, we wear clothes. We actually produce some fuel out of the land. And for me, it's the trilogy of 3 Fs: food, fuel, fiber. Now, it is the land because land degradation happens all over the world. It is not only in arid lands. It happens in forest, it happens in savanna, it happens in mountains. So it is the land because it is that same land that feeds the 8 billion people on Earth today. So it is therefore important that we conserve land all over, not only in arid lands. They are more vulnerable in arid lands. Ecosystems and communities are more vulnerable, and communities depend on a fewer number of species, but they are equally important in other lands. And it is not deforestation, not only deforestation, because land conversion, when you convert grassland or pastoral land to plain agriculture, it is land conversion. You don't see a tree falling, but actually you are destroying an ecosystem. When you transform a land which was a wetland to a city, because we have a growing population, therefore the cities are growing, then you are not deforesting, but you are actually destroying an ecosystem that was playing a role. And from time to time, because water has a very strong memory, when you have excess rains, that water comes to flood your cities. So, which is what we are seeing right now in Eastern Africa.
Yes.
Because that is land degradation.
Okay. Now, Ko, why is it important to act now to address land degradation?
As very well mentioned by Ibrahim, my colleague for more than a decade, I think we are really at the critical stage of the human development. That all the bad things happening surrounding us, the climate change, nature loss, and all disastrous things, are basically telling us that we are on the collision course of our human economic development with natural capital or natural system. And that's why that we have seen this. The only solution to me is to how to really modify our economic system, which has been really, really devastating, that the eating up the capacity of the natural system. And that's why the land is so important, because land is an integrator. We use this word several times, integrator of the many, many things that you said 3F, but it's really more than that. To me, it's really that our life support system. So that to take care of this life support system and how we can, in terms of action, you call action, how we can reform our economic system, which is really, really devastating the natural capital, is so important. Maybe second round, I would like to talk a little bit about about how we want to reform our economic system so that we not only restore our land, but also entirely restore the natural capital or natural system, so that we can continue.
So we cater to restoring it. We cater to restoring it.
Yeah.
When we talk about land restoration, Tariq, when we talk about and the whole issue with land degradation, you did bring up a very interesting topic during our communique, and you said it should be values-led, or there's a way to work on it where we link it to our values, to our community, to our religion also sometimes. How do you do that? How do you convince people through their values?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll link it just to what you're saying around economic transformation, because of course in this special meeting we're talking about the new growth story. And we heard in the opening plenary around the need to decouple growth from emissions. But I think what's interesting about land restoration, it's this opportunity to remember that we also need to decouple growth from biodiversity loss. We need to decouple growth from soil degradation. We need to decouple the growth from water depletion. We need to decouple actually growth from all of these environmental pressures. And it's a reminder that there can be no truly successful growth story without a successful land restoration story. And for me, the values base comes in is because we also know successful land restoration doesn't happen unless you have a growth story that's coupled with empathy, that's coupled with values, that's coupled with compassion. We find that in our experience, an example of restorers are faith communities. It's no surprise to me that in the land of 200 mosques, of course, that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is excelling when it comes to land restoration, because I think those values go very deep into who we are and the fabric.
Linked to it?
I do think, and there's a practical and I think a moral case. The practical case is 8% of all habitable land is actually owned and stewarded by faith communities. 50% of educational institutions in the world are faith-run and led. Our education values are instilled into us by faith communities. But it's not only about the outer restoration, it starts with an inner restoration. Obviously, in our religion, Islam teaches us about that inner restoration, what it means to live in those values. And I think the most successful land restoration initiatives I've seen is when it comes from that sense of spiritual and moral clarity.
Your Excellency, how is Saudi Arabia addressing land degradation or tackling the issue of land degradation?
في الواقع المملكة العربية السعودية
The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, since the launching of our 2030 initiative, identified several objectives in this context. The Ministry of Environment, during the first half of 2016, developed a plan for environment and management of water resources. And I think that this plan is based on the preservation of environment and on the need to clarify the roles and responsibilities of all stakeholders. We also have an institutional framework that highlights the role of specialized centers dedicated to the preservation of biodiversity, and we have allocated $10 billion for these centers. In addition to this, we have launched several initiatives by the government at the beginning of 2021. Green Saudi Arabia dedicated to preserving millions of hectares of lands. In addition to this, we have complementary programs like programs dedicated to cloud seeding due to the lack of rainfall in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So we have very encouraging indicators in this context. We will expand our activities and we have also developed it into a regional project in order for it to be beneficial for the whole region. We also have a comprehensive plan for the management of water resources, the need to increase the number of dams built. We want to benefit from each drop of water to ensure development in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And when we talk about the agricultural sector and the food sector in general, when we talk about food loss and waste, the international percentages reach 30%. If we are able to decrease it by half to reach 15%, you can imagine what the repercussions will be on the CO2 emissions. We also have a program dedicated to diminishing food loss by half by 2030. This program is also dedicated to restoring lands, and it includes all the details related to the use of pesticides. So in general, this program is extremely motivating and encouraging.
So we will keep the thought. We're going to come back and talk about the private sector as well and their involvement in this. But I'll move on to you, Brahim, and ask about, with the upcoming UNCCD COP16 on land, what are the main objectives? What are the expectations? What do you want to see?
First of all, we are very happy that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is hosting this COP. It's going to be the largest COP ever organized by the UNCCD over its 30 years of existence. And it is going to be a transformative COP. That's my expectation. Transformative in the sense that issues of land, drought, and water are elevated at a much higher political level, and that will create the momentum that we need to see a curve in land degradation in the world. I expect parties to come up with two major issues to look at them. I mean, there are multiple, but for the sake of time. One is the issue of drought.
Okay.
Droughts are happening all over the world. Just a couple of years ago, over 101 countries in the world were affected by drought. It's much more than what we need to know. It's 1.8 billion people from around the world were affected by drought. Over the last 23 years, we have seen 29% increase of droughts in the world. So it's a big issue, which is costing a lot.
Increase in floods, increase in drought as well.
I'll come back to, because they are twins. I'll come to floods. The issue is that when droughts occur in poor nations that have no reserves and have no insurance systems, it's a disaster. So you have an emergency and you have food aid and people dying and animals dying. It's a disaster. Any year of drought in these countries is a year of economic downturn. In countries which have more resources and more capacities to provide aid internally to their countries, it's also a recession from the economic point of view, because you cannot produce as much food as you need, so you need to import. Sometimes you also need to see how you can transport your food. Many people don't know that the Panama Canal, which is 12% of the world trade in currently, cannot process. The traffic is halted or limited due to droughts. And that's 12% of world trade. So it will have implications in terms of how we transport our food.
Supply and demand, yes.
Supply chains. So drought is one issue. So parties are expected in Riyadh to come up with a major decision on policy decision on how to address these issues of drought other than just responding to emergencies. We have got to be much more proactive. The second issue that the parties are expected to take is land restoration. Every year, we degrade 100 million hectares of land. That's twice the size of Greenland.
Okay.
100 million hectares of land are degraded. So in a way, by 2030, we need to restore 1.5 billion hectares of land in order to enable us to produce again food and to feed the growing population, because by 2050, we may be 9 billion people.
Okay.
So the demand is increasing while the resources are shrinking. So that imbalance is causing a lot of problems, economic problems, social, migration, security, you name it. I don't have time to elaborate on. So I expect parties to come up with these two issues that I think will be transformative for COP16 in Riyadh. There may be multiple other decisions, but I expect these to be the landmark decisions.
Now, you really wanted to talk about financing and how to get there and getting people involved in the financing. Why is it so important, and how do you get them involved?
First, I really want to support what Ibrahim said, and we need to make sure that the COP16 be transformative, something very, very different from the past. So, and I think the time is on our side because not only the carbon neutral, now nature positive is becoming the political agenda. So going back to you, we need to make sure that nature positive, which land is really sitting in the
So it's
heart of the
really on our side. I mean, the numbers are scary, like 9 billion people by 2050 losing 90% of the...
I'm talking about the political momentum and how to make sure that the nature is on the political agenda, high up. More than even the climate change. That's what I meant. The challenge is do we really know how to make this economic system transformative? That's also Tariq is talking about, because the reason we are devastating the nature system so much is our current economic system doesn't value adequately that the natural capital. That we talk about nature is important, but we just don't act as a nature is important. The reason is not because the people don't believe it. The reason is that the nature doesn't have a price yet, that adequate price yet. So that even if we spiritually admire nature, our day-to-day economic decision-making doesn't reflect it. So the question is how our economic decision-making, be it is a consumption, that investment, and whatever production, really does reflect of the natural capital value. And on that one, there are a few important progress already being made. I think that while that we were working together when I was with the GF, the UAT, the UNEP, and the UNCCD, that we have done quite a number of projects on the land management. And there are also the kind of success factor in it. If we were able to bring that sustainable land management, it's more like a policy issue, together with the people, with goodwill, and the capacity, and the finance. If we were able to combine those three conditions together, it will actually make a good progress case. However, my reflection, maybe sobering reflection, is it is very, very time-consuming, and it is very costly to do it. Cost is not necessarily money, it's more like a people's management and a goodwill intention kind of thing. So how we can really make it more systemic issue, that's why I put a lot of emphasis of the valuing the nature on the economic term, not in a very kind of spiritual term. And ideally speaking, if we are able to find a way to value, to put the monetary value on natural capital, and if we are able to see that these nature guardians, be it the smallholder farmers and the local community or the forest people, fisheries, are able to be rewarded by their effort of safeguarding natural capital, then investors may actually, the China example is a good one, the investor may actually get the finance to it. So a lot of effort going. I will come back later because it's going to be too late, too long. But then, if we are able to push those the efforts towards not only valuing natural capital but economic term, and ideally speaking, that put it as bring it as a new asset class on the balance sheet, it will be the game changer. That's my ambition.
You wanted to say?
I just wanted to comment because what she's saying is so true. That as humanity, we have been extracting resources, minerals, as if these were unlimited.
Okay.
We have not been managing them. We have been, take the example of agriculture, for example. We have been extracting the maximum we could get out of land. And when the land gets tired, we put fertilizers to incentivize it to produce even more. But we have not, and we extract as much water as possible to irrigate. So in terms of extractive industry, we have been extracting the resources. Now the question is, when can we turn that tide to actually move to a more management type rather than an extraction type? So it is a shift of mindset, a shift, and technology allows us to do it now. We have enough knowledge on how much soil the soil can support. So are we going to wait until the animal dies, or can we resuscitate that life, and this is land regeneration, and create another cycle of production on the same land?
But in that case, only the people who can afford it can benefit from it. The people who cannot afford it will be affected. So how do you make it available for them?
I don't buy that argument.
Okay. Okay.
Everybody, the poorer you are, the more dependent you are on land.
Exactly.
Because you have no reserves, you have no bank accounts, you have no assets, your only GDP is land.
Yes.
Right? Yep. So it is therefore important that we all consider this as, for what it is, our asset.
Okay.
And manage it properly. Of course, if you are less wealthy, you have less capacity to reinvest.
Of course, yes.
But you also have less impact on that land, because the wealthier you are, the higher the economy is, the higher the impact on land is. So the farmer that is using traditional tools is less destructive. So therefore, it is much easier for them to change gears. So what I'm saying here is that the change of mindset is absolutely important, because the notion of natural capital that she is talking about is really to consider this as an asset, not only as something that I would extract, and then the next generation, I don't care what they will be doing. We are now almost 9 billion people on Earth. We have no reserves left anymore. In the past, we had, and we could encroach on forests, we could destroy wetlands, but where do we go next?
So where do we go next, Taro?
Well, I think just to build on that, and it's always the oxymoron, because of course nature is our greatest partner in restoration. But as I say, it's an oxymoron because when we put nature first, we are putting people first. It's people, it's indigenous communities, it's local communities who are doing the restoration work alongside nature. And we need to really be giving those tools as well to those communities. And I think this is really the exciting thing about COP16 as well. Because it's a COP16 of, we've heard of public-private partnership, of really opportunities there. But it's also a COP of public-planet partnerships. It's a COP in which we're able to put nature at the center, saying that nature is also the greatest partner in collaboration, that when we look at these solutions of measuring pollution data, we can do that in partnering with the bees for data. We can partner with fungi for drought-resistant crops. We can partner with mangroves as well for protecting crops. And we partner with microbial communities for restoring the soil. And also for all the innovation we're talking about outside of this room, all of that innovation, all of that human inventiveness, all of that AI is purely dependent on 6 inches of topsoil that's healthy. And this is a COP that I think will re-remind the world of that. But it's also a COP in which we talked about values. It's also a COP that's, I think, the litmus test for the business community in the MENA region. Because when we talk about COP, I'll be very honest with you.
Okay.
People think COP27 and COP28 in Egypt and UAE on climate. That's where the business community's minds go. And we've seen unprecedented investment and engagement from the business community in those COPs. But as Ibrahim talked of the metrics and the targets, those same targets he talked about are the targets of those other COPs as well. Across these shared conventions, across the UNFCCC, UNCCD, and UNCBD, we're talking about the same targets on restoration, the same targets on emission reductions. And it is, for me, a litmus test because is the business community for the last 2 years been engaging in COPs as greenwashing, or are they still going to show up to COP16 very serious about continuing their investments, continuing their engagements, continuing actually the real work of restoration? So and I think what happens in December is a test of what...
So just let me be the devil's advocate here.
Yeah, of course.
Do you think it was branding and marketing initially? And how do we measure if it continues or not?
Well, because
we're going to ask His Excellency about it in a bit.
Because I think that's actually where the values are, because it is branding and marketing if we see that that engagement isn't there in December. Because in essence, in every panel, every talk, every press release, business communities understood and talked the talk of the business case for climate action. That exact same business case exists for land restoration. So I think for us, it's a wait and see. It's also, I think, an imperative for business communities to engage. It makes sense for all of us. I come from a small island myself. I know that our island's a beautiful island, but an island in which we know the importance of land restoration. And I think for us, it's a real opportunity and also a challenge as well for the business community to say, you showed up to the other COPs, which was great. And this is the COP that I think is probably the most important one for you to show up to, engage with, and invest in.
So you think people are going to show up, Your Excellency?
أنا أعتقد هذه الاتفاقيات الثلاث الأمم المتحدة.
I believe these 3 UN agreements may not have got a lot of attention worldwide. I believe that the UNCCD did not really receive the attention that it deserved. And even these 3 conventions do not really live up to their expectations. I believe in the KSA, we deeply believe in this objective, and we will strive to have an unprecedented meeting in this regard. We do not wish that it would be a mere meeting and COP16 would be over and things would be back again to their normal state. We will have to collaborate, and there will be an international statement to declare the necessity to stop desertification. And we will strive to give this agreement the importance it deserves.
About what the government was doing in order to help land restoration and to focus on this. And I told you we need to talk about the private sector. How is the private sector being involved, and how are we involving them? Not only the private sector today, the communities, the youth of the region, how are they getting involved in this?
عشان نتحدث بواقعية.
To be realistic, investing in this field does not yield the necessary financial revenues, and this is the mere reality on the ground. Therefore, in our policy, we are offering incentives. There's also the social corporate responsibility. We have volunteers. There are a lot of environmental and green companies and institutions and so forth. We believe in KSA that what we started some years ago in working with the private sector on developing green parks, and we were successful. We have signed more than one partnership with the private sector to develop these parks and to benefit financially from these parks, and also to restore and safeguard these lands. This would definitely leverage the quality of life. Many pioneering Saudi companies in the kingdom have shown their readiness to assume their social corporate responsibility. And the number of volunteers is an important part of this element. I believe these are collaborative efforts. We cannot work single-handedly. We have to work in unison with others to be successful. Thank you.
When we look at this, there is no return on investment, direct return on investment.
I did not say that.
No, okay.
I did not say that.
You said there is no financial return.
No, I did not say that. What I said is this does not provide the highest return on investment.
Okay. So how can we get the highest return on investment when it comes to land restoration and saving our land.
Financially, I meant.
Financially, yes, yes. And I meant financially.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at companies that are investing on land right now, they are doing a lot of profits. We are talking about agriculture. We are talking about livestock. We are talking about companies doing water resources management. We are talking about companies that are doing reforestation, afforestation, and management, sustainable management of forests and extracting these resources. We are talking about continental fisheries, et cetera, et cetera. So they are doing business. Again, the mindset that we talked about earlier, the mindset of extraction, they are doing mining.
Giving back, yeah.
They are doing mining, which is also one source of land degradation in the world. So most of these companies have to reset their relationships with nature to actually consider this as their asset. Because let me give you a picture of what was happening in the world initially, especially when it comes to the relations between Africa and Europe. You remember after the Berlin Conference in 1884, 8 European powers divided Africa into pieces and colonized the whole continent. Not that they liked Africans, because they had access to the land. And they have been extracting these resources for centuries until these countries got independence. But the problem is that we have not been able to change that relationship. So the same is happening in Latin America, in Europe, in the Middle East. The same mindset of extraction is happening. So according to our economics analysis, every single dollar invested in land restoration can generate between $7 and $30 of economic returns. Not financial, but economic returns. Therefore, it can be profitable. Of course, if the land is totally degraded, it will cost much more to restore it. But even then, if you include the spiritual values, the social values, the economic values, the resilience of the communities, then even then it becomes viable. Not financially, not totally financially acceptable for companies, but if you have a public policy, public-private partnership, then you can have something visible, including in sand dunes, as I explained earlier. I talked about 3 Fs. I will talk to you about 3 Rs. Risks, rewards, and responsibilities. How much risks companies are ready to take to invest, and you as a contributor to your pension fund, because it's essentially pension fund money that is being reinvested in banks and so forth. How much risks are you ready to take to actually invest your pension money into an activity that is going to destroy the environment and is going to destroy the planet and is going to destroy the future of your children?
Okay. Yeah.
That's what it is. How much of your tax money, because we are taxpayers, how much of your tax money are you ready to invest in incentives that are going to destroy the environment, destroy nature, destroy the soil, and pollute the land? How much are you ready to make that? So in terms of risks. And finally, how much risks are companies willing to take to invest in areas that they know will be hit by the next drought, maybe in the next 7 years or 10 years, but that is nothing in terms of the time frame that an investor makes. So are we going to do some stress tests to make sure that when the next shock comes, the building will remain, or are we going to see the building collapse at the next earthquake?
Okay.
That's basically what it is. So we have to be very clear that we have a solid foundation that can withstand the shocks that are going to come.
Your Excellency, you wanted to say something.
ما تحدث
What Dr. Ibrahim said in general is true, but the question was, what are the financial yields to the private sector, excuse me. The private sector does not really seek these yields. These are economic yields that are beneficial for countries. Therefore, we have to safeguard the lands first and foremost through regulations and laws, or at least part of them would be protected as such. Secondly, we need to provide incentives, and we need to encourage the investments in land restoration and to stop land degradation to be economically viable. And I believe we have to evaluate that seriously. As proof, no one is investing in the private sector in land restoration without encouragement and incentives. Thank you.
Add as well to that, because I think also what's being articulated here is, in the context of the meeting, growth. Growth is a gamble. Growth is this gamble that our future growth can both fix the extraction and the damage that we've caused in the past to our economy, as well as the potential extraction in the future. And for the private sector, for me, it's not as much the return on the investment, it's that actually land restoration is de-risking that gamble. That's why it's so important to really engage. It is really de-risking and putting the guardrails and the boundaries that our growth is a growth that is of quality, it's of growth within planetary boundaries. We're doing so responsibly. So I think of it as a case of de-risking, certainly.
Now, please, yes, I would like to get your comment, but we have just less than 9 minutes left, so if we have any questions, I will take a question after Nauko's done, please.
Yeah, no, Ibrahim made a wonderful, education to us that thinking about the history of Africa, Latin America, and why the nature may not be really valued yet. It's more like a historical development. And the fact is that, as you said, the current economic system coming from industrial revolution time really underpin the modern growth. And then during that time, we don't necessarily have to value the natural capital because nature seems to be plenty. It may be limitless. It may be infinite. And that is maybe the true until maybe last century. And that's why that it's more like a free goods. And that's why we continue to destroy it. But we came to know that there is a limit. There is the nature is a finite resources, and we need to really take care of that, how we can incorporate those new, actually scientific or economic reality. And that's why we are now talking about how to value, putting the value of natural capital as an important production element. Unfortunately, as Minister, His Excellency mentioned, it's still only the CSR coming because it's not directly produced.
What's in it for me?
Yeah, and also, and as you said, only affordable people, the high-income people can afford it. That is the reality as of today. So that's why I'm actually asking that with business community, with policymakers, can we change the rule of the game to put the monetary valuation of the natural capital? What I'm talking about is how we can find a way to change the accounting rule, how we can change the way of MRB, measurement, reporting, and then valuation, and how to actually put the value, it's qualitative, quantitative, but monetary valuation, and how to disclose it. And if that all of economic participants come together to think about how to change those rules of the economic system, financial system, we may be able to, should be able to, the way that the nature be valued, and if you are able to put it on the balance sheet, then it's going to be investable asset. How we can really chart the pathway. It's not a 1 year time thing, it's not a 2 year time, but if we can chart the pathway at COP16 and beyond, that's going to be a huge contribution, because that is the future, how the human being can peacefully live together with nature, in harmony with nature. That's something we need to really work on.
Do we have any questions? Yeah, can we take a question here, please? Yeah. We have just under 6 minutes left, so we'll try to take the questions quickly if we can, please.
Yes, thank you so much for that very interesting panel. My name is Abhishek. I'm a global shaper from the Zurich Hub in Switzerland. My question is very simple. So from this discussion, it seems to be quite clear that land is in the nexus of water, food, and climate. And wastewater is one example of how this nexus plays out. Majority of the land degradation that's happening through pollution is happening through the water pathway. And at the same time, wastewater could also be seen as a resource which could potentially bring back the nutrients through the food cycle back into the land and so on. So my question is, how much of these synergies are going to take center stage in the COP going forward? Because in many of the other discussions that we're plugged into, land degradation and land restoration does not take the same center stage in other COPs, and perhaps this offers us an opportunity to highlight these synergies a bit further.
Who would like to? Yes, please.
There is no such thing as wastewater. It's only wasted water. Wasted water is part of the equation because if agriculture uses that much water, it is possible to actually reuse it and recycle it and retreat it and put it again to the economy. It's the same concept as the circular economy. The minister just talked about food waste and food loss, which is another big dimension of the issue. Are we going to just go head on continuing to extract and throw? Extraction, manufacturing, and throwing is the linear economy. We have to actually have a circular economy all over, in all domains, including wastewater. So yes, it is part of the solution.
Your Excellency, I think you agree. Can we have a question over there? I think we have time for this.
Can you hear me if I use my voice?
It's streamed live, so.
Okay. So Arne Cartridge with Yara, a large fertilizer company, and I just want to give voice to the private sector, so if you allow me.
Please.
So one, the private sector is interested and engaged for many reasons. I mean, us as a fertilizer company, prosperity of the farmer is critical, and thereby we need to invest more in soil health. So we need to support the farmer to invest and be more capable. We see this as a public-private collaboration, and it is required and needed. I'll give you one short example. We are in discussions now with President Ruto in Kenya and with the World Bank, how they as a government can shift their subsidies on fertilizer to incentives to invest in soil health. A lot of their soils are acidic, they need liming. How do we do that in a public and private way? So the answer is private sector is at the table. We want to contribute, and we want to be part of the discussions.
So maybe you talk to His Excellency after after our session. So we have just less than 3 minutes. So if we can maybe wrap up, but I would like to wrap up with you instead of wrapping up by myself. Your Excellency, we start with you. If we were to put on the table today a call to action, what do you expect to see, and what is the time frame? Say if we have 30 seconds to say this.
سأقول التالي.
I would say the following. In KSA, you are working on involving the countries of the world. In the G20, one of the initiatives that were launched are related to stopping land degradation. And this was our initiative that we supported. KSA on April 2021 launched the Green Initiative and provided more than $20 billion. Therefore, we have to work collaboratively, and we have to remember that we live on a single planet, on a single Earth, and what happens to one part of the world affects us. And this is what KSA works in favor of.
2030 is our deadline.
Okay.
All of us, SDGs, we agreed to that, and it remains our milestone. By 2030, we have to not only reduce drastically the amount of the amount of land that we are destroying and degrading, but we have to restore and put back to health land that has already been degraded. And it is possible. And it is 1.5 billion hectares. Second is this COP is a wonderful opportunity for the world, for the host country, but for the world as well, to turn the tide on drought and to stop just lamenting and providing food to those who are dying, to actually be more proactive, prepare them to the next drought, help them build their resilience and achieve something meaningful by 2030.
Now, Ko, in 30 seconds, what's your call to action?
By 2025, which is COP30 Brazil COP, that then we create a coalition or allies to go together, move together to put the natural capital as a new asset class on the balance sheet. It's only the roadmap can be done by 2025. Because it's a long-term issue.
It's good to give ourselves deadlines, yes.
Yep.
Tarek.
We started with the values, and the most values-led stakeholder are young people and young leaders like those in the Global Shapers community. They have the moral clarity, but also they are uncompromising on all the science that you've heard here. Their projects, their actions are deeply grounded in the science and the values of spiritual leadership as well. And I think we'd be far more successful in restoration if we bring them along as key partners at every step of the way.
My dear guests, thank you so much. And dear audience, thank you for being with us today. Like His Excellency said, I'd like to finish. We all share this earth, so let's take care of it. Thank you all very much.